So, uh, what if the reason your bank account is basically empty 3 days after payday isn't just inflation?
Right, or just bad luck.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What if it's actually a byproduct of how our, modern financial environment is engineered?
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, we live in this ecosystem that's designed to remove literally all friction from spending.
Just one click, one tap, uh, auto pay, saved credit cards.
The money is just gone before your brain even registers the transaction.
It is. And that vanishing paycheck, it isn't just a personal failing, which is what we always tell ourselves. It's a highly optimized system working exactly as intended.
Working against you, yeah.
Right. So today's mission for this deep dive is about breaking out of that loop. We're looking at this really comprehensive guide from the YouTube channel Don Invests.
And it's titled Start Budgeting with Little Money, featuring 10 easy tips for 2026.
Exactly. It focuses on building a budget from the ground up, specifically for people who are, starting with very little money.
Which is such an important demographic to target because the overarching philosophy of this source, it really challenges that traditional restrictive view of budgeting.
Yeah, we usually associate budgets with, total deprivation.
Exactly, just misery. But the premise here is about shifting from a reactive state where you're just watching the money disappear and panicking to a proactive state.
Taking the wheel.
Right. It's about wresting control back from that frictionless spending environment you just mentioned and forcing your money to work for your specific goals rather than against them.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if the goal is to take back control, the source insists you can't navigate out of a maze until you acknowledge your exact coordinates.
You have to know where you are.
Right. Before you can direct your resources, you have to capture the hard data of what those resources are currently doing.
Yep.
So the foundational step here, tip 1, is pure, unadulterated awareness, tracking every single expense.
Every single one, down to the penny.
And I have to admit, when I first read this, the resistance I felt was massive.
Oh, totally. Nobody wants to do that.
Tracking every penny feels incredibly tedious. Like, it's one thing to know your rent or your car payment, but logging a $4 transaction at the convenience store, or like a random subscription renewal.
Yeah, but what's fascinating here is that the friction you're feeling is actually the point of the exercise.
Wait, really? The annoyance is the point?
Absolutely. In behavioral economics, there's this concept related to the observer effect. The moment you begin actively monitoring a behavior, the behavior automatically begins to shift.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like a food diary.
Exactly like a food diary. When you rely on guesses, you grant yourself plausible deniability. You tell yourself, oh, I only eat out occasionally, or, my utility bills are roughly $50.
But they're actually 150.
Right. Forcing yourself to track the real numbers for a few weeks strips away that denial. You are confronting the cumulative effect of those microtransactions.
Because it's the cognitive load of it that changes the habit. If I know I have to, physically write down that I bought a mediocre coffee at 3 in the afternoon, I might just skip the coffee to avoid the chore of logging it.
Exactly. You're interrupting the frictionless loop.
And the source brings in a really famous Dave Ramsey quote to anchor the stage. He says, "A budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went."
Which perfectly captures the transition from being a passive victim of your expenses to the active manager of them.
Yeah, you become the boss.
Right. And once you have that raw data, the source pushes you into tip 4, which is categorizing those numbers to understand the underlying mechanics of your outflow, wants versus needs.
The ultimate showdown.
It really is. Because for someone living on a tight margin, the line between what is essential for survival like rent and basic groceries and what is merely a lifestyle enhancer, that becomes the central battleground.
Because when you look at the raw data, the hard questions they bubble up to the surface automatically. Like, can I find a cheaper alternative for this? Do I actually value this streaming service enough to trade, hours of my physical labor for it?
And answering those questions requires a framework, which leads directly into tip 3 in the source material establishing a visible target. Setting goals for your money.
Because if you're going to voluntarily cut an expense, you need a really compelling reason for why you're enduring that temporary discomfort.
Exactly. Setting those realistic, flexible goals fundamentally alters your psychological relationship with your money. The source utilizes a quote from Tony Robbins here.
Oh, I like this one.
Yeah, he says, setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible.
That's good.
Because before this process, your financial future might just be a vague, looming cloud of anxiety.
Just general dread.
Right. But by articulating a specific goal, whether it's saving a certain dollar amount or paying off a specific credit card, you condense that anxiety into a concrete, measurable target. It's a roadmap.
Yeah, it keeps you from getting lost on the trip. And once the target is visible, you need a mechanism to actually hit it. You can't just leave your income sitting in a checking account hoping that, some of it survives until the end of the month.
Now, hope is not a financial strategy.
Definitely not. So the guide introduces tip 2, which is giving every dollar a job. This is basically zero-based budgeting.
And just to be clear for the listener, budgeting down to zero does not mean draining your bank account to zero.
Right, that would be terrifying.
It means allocating your entire income into specific categories before the month even begins. Every dollar covers fixed expenses, a tax debt, or moves into a savings vehicle.
And if there's money left over.
If there is money left over after all the essentials and goals are met, you must assign that remainder a job too, even if the job is just a designated fund money category, so it doesn't just vanish.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, because I love the mechanics of this. It reminds me of managing a business.
Okay, how so?
Think of every single dollar you earn as an employee in your own personal company. You are the CEO. If you hire 100 employees and give 90 of them specific tasks like you pay the electric bill, you buy the groceries, but you leave 10 employees just sitting in the break room with no instructions.
They're going to get into trouble.
Exactly. They aren't going to just sit there quietly. They're going to wander off, get distracted, and disappear. You have to assign them.
That is a perfect analogy. Unassigned capital is highly vulnerable to impulse. When money sits aimlessly in an account, the brain perceives it as a surplus.
Oh, I have extra money.
Right, which drastically lowers the psychological barrier to spending it on something completely unnecessary. The source reinforces this mechanism with a quote from Warren Buffett. He says, "Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving."
So you're building the muscle of intentionality. By giving every dollar a purpose up front, you eliminate the ambiguity that leads to decision fatigue.
Exactly. Every dollar has its marching orders.
So, okay, the blueprint is drafted. We're tracking the reality, the visible targets are set, and every dollar is deployed like a directed employee.
Sounds perfect.
On paper. But a flawless budget on a spreadsheet rarely survives contact with the physical world.
That is the truth.
You build this hyper-optimized plan, and then, 3 days later, your car needs a new alternator, or you have an unexpected medical bill. How do we engineer resilience into this blueprint so it doesn't just shatter the moment the environment changes?
Well, the source outlines a defensive strategy designed specifically to absorb those environmental shocks. And it starts with tip 5, which is planning for irregular expenses.
Okay, wait. Irregular versus unexpected.
Right. It's about recognizing the difference between an actual emergency and an irregular expense. We tend to lump everything that doesn't happen monthly into the unexpected category.
Yeah, like, oh no, Christmas is here again.
Exactly. Things like holiday gifts or car registration or back-to-school supplies, they are completely predictable. They just operate on a different time horizon.
They aren't emergencies at all. They're just irregular. Yet they constantly blow up people's checking accounts because they aren't factored into the normal monthly math.
And the solution provided here is to isolate those costs. You calculate the annual cost of those irregular events, divide by 12, and route that specific amount into a separate savings account every single month.
So it's like a proactive safety net.
Exactly. The guide quotes Benjamin Franklin to illustrate the risk of ignoring this. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail.
Wow.
When you have systematically funded that separate account, the arrival of the annual car registration bill triggers zero financial stress. The money was already waiting for it.
But what about the true unknowns, like the shocks to the system you absolutely cannot forecast?
That brings us to tip 6. The guide recommends creating a dedicated emergency fund, suggesting an initial achievable target of around $600.
Okay, 600.
And then they pair this with tip 7, which is a mandate to stop using credit and prioritize debt repayment, especially high-interest debt.
Because that interest just eats you alive.
Exactly. They quote Mark Cuban here, who says, "Pay off your debt first. Freedom from debt is worth more than any amount you can earn."
Because every dollar saved on interest stays in your pocket.
Right.
But I have to pause and advocate for the listener here, because this is where the advice often feels a little detached from reality.
Okay, how so?
We established that this source is designed for people operating on really low incomes, right?
Right.
How does someone who is struggling to cover basic rent Systematically fund a separate account for irregular expenses, build a $600 emergency buffer, and D, aggressively tackle high-interest debt all at the same time.
It sounds impossible.
It feels like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. The math simply doesn't seem to support doing all three simultaneously on a tight margin.
Well, the friction you're highlighting is real, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, the source clarifies that this is a gradual process done over time, pay period by pay period.
So you aren't doing it all on day one.
No, it's about allocating whatever micro margins you have, even if it's only $5 a pay period, into that emergency buffer first.
Just to get something in there.
Right. And the psychology behind that initial $600 threshold is vital. That specific amount is often enough to cover a minor medical bill or, a blown tire, which prevents the individual from putting that crisis on a high-interest credit card.
Or taking out a payday loan.
Exactly. It stops the cascade of debt.
It changes the nature of the event entirely.
It does. The source uses a Zig Ziglar quote here. Success occurs when opportunity meets preparation. By building that initial buffer, you're fundamentally downgrading unexpected events from catastrophic financial disasters to mere administrative inconveniences.
Oh, I love that. Downgrading a disaster to an inconvenience is such a powerful framework. A flat tire stops being a crisis that threatens your ability to buy groceries, and it just becomes a frustrating errand. But, even a $5 a week contribution requires some capital. If the income is relatively fixed and the margins are razor thin, we have to uncover capital that's currently being deployed inefficiently. We need to find hidden cash within the existing lifestyle without necessarily getting a second job.
And this raises an important question about how we run our households. The guide offers highly specific mechanical adjustments for your daily life to reclaim that capital. A major focal point is Tip 8, monitor and adjust utility consumption, specifically electricity.
Okay, but doesn't that usually just mean, turn off the lights when you leave a room, which honestly feels like a drop in the bucket?
It does feel that way, but the guide digs into the actual economics of the power grid. They strongly recommend investigating time-of-use plans with your utility provider.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, power companies often charge significantly higher rates during peak demand hours, usually in the late afternoon and early evening when everyone is returning home, turning on the AC, the TV, all the appliances.
Right.
By understanding this pricing structure, you can shift heavy energy consumption, like running a dishwasher or a clothes dryer, to off-peak hours.
Wait, does running the dishwasher at 10 p.m. really move the needle enough to matter?
It actually does. You're purchasing the exact same amount of electricity, but you're buying it when it's artificially cheaper due to lower grid demand.
Oh, okay.
And when you combine that structural change with unplugging phantom draw electronics and, using energy-efficient bulbs, the aggregate effect on a monthly bill becomes very meaningful.
It's like your household is a leaky boat, and leaving electronics plugged in are these tiny leaks that slowly sink your budget over the month.
Exactly. And the guide quotes Thomas Edison here. The value of an idea lies in the using of it.
Oh, right.
Knowing about peak pricing is totally useless unless you mechanically change the time you press the start button on your washing machine.
You actually have to do it. Another area where the source finds hidden capital is Tip 9, which is trying to do it yourself, or DIY, before paying a pro.
Yes. Reclaiming personal agency over basic maintenance.
Because we live in an era heavily biased toward convenience, right? The default reaction to a leaky faucet or a minor car issue is to immediately hire a professional.
Right, which costs a fortune.
It does. But the guide challenges this reflex, pointing out that we have access to endless step-by-step tutorials online now.
And the financial impact here is twofold. First, obviously, you're immediately retaining the hundreds of dollars you would have surrendered for an hour of a professional's labor.
Sure.
But the secondary psychological impact is arguably more important. Successfully completing a minor repair reinforces the proactive mindset that anchors this entire budgeting philosophy. It proves to you that you are capable of maintaining your own environment.
The source actually includes a really great quote from Amy Poehler on this topic. She joked, "I think everybody should have to learn to change their own oil and fix a leaky sink."
It sounds like a joke about just being an adult, but it speaks directly to self-reliance.
It really does. When you realize you aren't helpless in the face of minor breakdowns, your confidence in your ability to manage your broader financial life increases.
Which is critical because your financial life is going to demand constant management. You've Established the real numbers, deployed every dollar, built the emergency buffers, and optimized your daily operations to reclaim capital.
But the environment will inevitably shift again. Your rent might increase next month, or, maybe you finally secure a raise.
Right. So the final concept the source tackles tip 10 is the necessity of treating the budget as a living document. Review and adjust it regularly.
Because we often treat budgets like a rigid, brittle contract we sign with ourselves.
Mm.
And the moment the math doesn't perfectly align with reality, the contract feels broken and people just abandon the entire system.
Exactly, and a static budget will snap under the pressure of real life. It's not a one-and-done deal. The guide insists on regular, scheduled recalibrations.
How often are we talking?
When you're first establishing these systems, they recommend setting a reminder to review it monthly, uncompromisingly. You sit down, look at the actual spending versus the planned spending, and adjust the allocations for the next month based on the new reality. Once the habits are deeply ingrained, that review cycle can extend to every 3 months to account for fluctuating expenses, but the process of adjustment never truly stops.
So what does this all mean? It's kind of like a GPS navigation system.
Yeah.
If you miss an exit or hit traffic like a rent increase, you don't throw the GPS out the window.
No, you definitely don't.
You just let it recalculate your route.
Mhm.
The budget has to absorb the real-world impact and dynamically divert funds to maintain your forward momentum.
That dynamic adjustment is the only way to ensure your resources continually align with your evolving life goals on the path to financial freedom. And the guide concludes this section with a quote from John C. Maxwell that actually mirrors the Dave Ramsey sentiment we discussed at the very beginning.
Oh, what is it?
He says, "A budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went."
Perfect bookend.
It really is. It reinforces that this entire process, from that painful initial tracking to the ongoing monthly recalibrations, is a continuous exercise in directed intention.
It is just incredibly satisfying to see all the underlying mechanics connect like this. I mean, we started by examining that stressful, helpless feeling of a vanishing paycheck and the frictionless environment that causes it. And by reverse engineering the advice from Donna Vest, we've walked through how to interrupt that loop. You weaponize awareness by tracking the real numbers.
Right.
You assign every single dollar a job to eliminate the vulnerability of unassigned capital. You sequence your safety nets to downgrade disasters into inconveniences. You reclaim hidden cash by understanding grid pricing and DIY agency. And finally, you build that active GPS system to absorb the shocks of a changing life.
It requires a fundamental paradigm shift. You're no longer reacting to an environment designed to drain your resources. You are actively engineering a system to protect and grow them.
Absolutely.
And as we wrap up this analysis, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder, looping back to that Benjamin Franklin quote regarding preparation. Consider your current relationship with money. What if the chronic financial stress you feel right now isn't actually caused by a lack of income, but simply a lack of explicit instruction?
Oh, wow.
If every dollar in your possession is a highly capable employee waiting for a directive, you hold the authority. You are the boss. How will you organize and deploy your workforce tomorrow?
Are you going to leave them unassigned in the break room, waiting to be absorbed by a frictionless spending environment? Or are you going to put them to work building the architecture of your future? The choice is entirely in your hands. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope unpacking these mechanics provides you with both the clarity and the strategy to take that first step toward financial wellness. Until next time, keep adjusting the route and keep driving forward.